So what is an API? You probably heard this thrown around before and everything. Um, Basically, I'll do the typical like Webster's dictionary. I didn't look at Webster's though, but the Wikipedia has this API definition as a set of subroutine definitions, communications protocols, and tools for building software. It is a set of clearly defined methods of communication among various components. Okay, cool, great. So what does that mean? Um, Basically what I would say, it's kind of the Pirates of the Caribbean thing, that you're abiding by a certain set of rules or a certain set of guidelines, right? So typically that's going to be some like interior functions to a software program or whatever that is going to allow you to use the full suite of the software product itself. A lot of times in the web world, we're using API as in reference to like an endpoint and stuff. But there are a lot of APIs in WordPress already. So we have the plugins API, which is, if you've ever done any custom development, it's basically the add action or add filter, do action, apply filters, all of that kind of stuff that allows you to hook in and modify things that WordPress gives to you out of the box. There's the options API in WordPress that allows you to kind of set site-wide settings, and that's like options and transients. There's the HTTP API, the REST API. We're going to be kind of talking about both of those-ish, not really HTTP API, but just HTTP in general. But the REST API that WordPress now has as of like 7 years ago, to make kind of, CRUD. We'll talk about CRUD operations in a little bit here. Shortcode API, if you're creating a shortcode, and a ton of other APIs that are in there. So WordPress already ships with these application programming interfaces that are built into the system. But a lot of times when we're talking about integrations and building out kind of distributed or headless systems, we're talking about APIs in a sense of like GitHub has an API that you can make a call and get your GitHub repo list or something like that. Or Stripe has an API that you can, send your authorization key over, and then you can create like a checkout process and charge somebody's credit card, right? So APIs, when we're talking about it in the web world, are really just a request and response cycle, right? And that's really what the World Wide Web is all about, right? Like if you go to google.com and hit enter, you're making a request for that website, and the internet gives you back google.com, or hopefully at least that's what it does, right? So you're basically asking for something and you're receiving that back. When we're talking about other APIs, like whether it's, like I said, GitHub, Stripe, MailChimp, HubSpot, all these other APIs that a lot of us web developers tend to integrate with, we're able to take advantage of code and structure that other people have written and developed, right? So we get to operate and work with software that we probably didn't write, which is really nice because we don't have to build everything from scratch all the time, right? If a company has an API that's openly available, then you're able to, take advantage of all that, right? That also does come with a lot of unknowns. And sometimes you don't know necessarily, depending on how well the API is documented, you don't know what you're going to be getting back, or you don't really know if you're going to get like an avalanche of data that you don't really need. So you might get a bunch of stuff back that you don't really need, whereas you would like to pick and choose a couple things. So, and that's, I put in parentheses GraphQL there, because GraphQL does allow you to kind of select what you're actually going to be getting back, and we'll kind of see how that works a little bit later. So, so basically, like how do APIs work? One of the best places that I've found to kind of check this out is in the it's on a website called Request Response. I'm actually going to pull up a desktop application called Insomnia as well, for anybody who has insomnia or just stays up late developing. It's kind of appropriate. So basically, like what I was talking about before with the request response cycle is basically this, right? We can create these requests and send them out to an API and get a response. So this request and response is an example, right, of what we could get from this. This is kind of like a dummy API. So it allows you to like kind of practice or test your API calls against its database, right? So this is a very typical RESTful interface too. I think that it says that it's a REST interface. Yeah, REST API ready to respond to your AJAX requests. So basically what this allows you to do is say like, cool, I want to just practice my API, or I want to test what like information I'm getting back and stuff like that. So you can perform a GET request, and GET is just saying like, it's kind of like just saying like, hey, give me back something that I'm asking for. It's like the easiest, most basic API request type that, and you'll just do these all the time, a GET request, right? So a GET request just says like, it's a read on whatever the database is, and just saying like, hey, give me back, and in this case, it's a list of users, right? So you can see here on the right-hand side, the response is a 200 response. 200 is good. That means that the response was successful. And you might see like 404s and 500s and all that stuff that you've run into on the internet before. Those are all response codes for like HTTP, right? So if something didn't come back, it might be a 400, like, or a 404, like the specified, user in this case was not found. But in this case, we got a 200. So you can scroll over here and see, cool, we got a user, Michael Lawson, Lindsay Ferguson, Tobias Funke, Brian Fields, and everybody here from Arrested Development, right? So if we wanted to get just a single user, right? And again, this is if like the API is open, right? Sometimes you're going to have a way to authenticate yourself to get these responses back. But basically you can ask for a single user. So you'll see like this query parameter, this pages, just kind of maybe ignore that. And it's just like /API/users. So if you're doing that, you're getting back all of the users, right? But if you just want a single user, you just say API/users/2, and that's the user ID here. And then it'll just give you back Janet Weaver in this sense, right? So that's a very basic like API thing. And you can just go here and just hit these and look at them. And when I say hit them, I mean like request at the API endpoint and everything. But you can just hit those API endpoints and see what they give you back. I should also say too, like over the last few years, API work and working with various APIs has been something that has been the most exciting thing that I've done, because you can take data from multiple sources and kind of blend it all together. And then also too, like, if you wanted to, you can basically you could run these programmatically in a sense too. You could get this list of users back, and then let's say that you just have an ID, if we weren't getting back email and first name, or in this case, okay, so yeah, but like, let's say Janet Weaver, this particular API endpoint only gives us back like her job title, her date of birth, a bunch of other information that this list of users doesn't give back, right? So that's pretty typical, is that you'll get a list of users or a list of whatever that doesn't send back all this information, because the more information and detail that is sent back, the heavier and longer it takes, right? So maybe what you end up doing then is with a REST API, you say like, cool, I got a list of users. Now for each of those users, I'm going to make a call and say like, okay, give me the details for a user with an ID of 2, right? And so in that case, let's say, for example, pretend that this came back with all of Janet's information, her address, phone number, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, so you can see too that these are, like I said, both GET requests. So we also have other request types that we'll typically use are post requests here, put or patch requests, and then delete requests. And you'll see here that it has create, update, and delete. This GET request here, it doesn't say read, but we say CRUD applications a lot, CRUD, and that just is an acronym for create, read, update, and delete, right? So if you think about like anytime you've used Facebook or an app, like a web application like that, if you log on to there, you are logging in, so you're being authenticated, so you can do things, right? You don't just want anybody coming onto your Facebook account, right, and just creating a post or something like that. So you get authenticated, and then you can create a post, right? And that gets posted to your timeline. On your timeline, you read a bunch of stuff, right? Other people's posts and stuff like that. if you need to update something like your name or your relationship status or something like that on Facebook, you go and you update that, right? And then if you need to delete a friend or a photo or something like that, you delete that, right? So those are all the create, read, update, and delete. Now you can get like really granular about that, and there's more stuff that you can do, like option calls and stuff, but we're not really going to talk about those today. And in fact, we're mostly just going to be talking about reading from APIs, because that is probably the easiest thing to kind of grasp. So if you want to go and practice on something, you can kind of look at this. And then because this is an open API, I opened up Insomnia before, but you can download this. And this is a insomnia.rest. Yeah. So at insomnia.rest, and you can download this. This is on, I think this is on Mac, Windows, and Linux as well. There's another API client like this called Postman, which is a lot bigger and more complicated, but it has a lot more features to it. It also has a built-in boot camp. So if you're interested, you really get into APIs and you want to learn how to like build them and scale them, then that boot camp feature on the Postman application is also really cool. So you can feel free to download this. Oh, I should say, all this stuff is .com/talks. If you want to, you are more than welcome to go here now, n8finch.com/talks. WordPress is an API. I've got the slides and here on the presentation slides, and you can download those if you like, for just clicking and perusing later. So if you do get Insomnia, basically what you can do is take this like HTTP recres, and then it's like /API/users. You can see on your own off the website how this works, right? So you can make this API request and send it. It allows you also, like we were seeing earlier, like to put in parameters here. So if you want to do page parameters, you could do page parameter, click send, and get back page number 2, right? Or page number 3 that doesn't have anything on it. So if you wanted to just get a user, right, you would do like user 11. Let's see if there's any. Yeah, George Edwards. User number 1 is George Bluth, always number 1 in our hearts. So if you wanted to create something, like I was saying, you can send a post request here. So you can select the different kinds of requests that you want to send and send it to the user's endpoint. And then you would just fill out this JSON data. And I basically just copied, pasted that from down here on the website. Where was it? Like right here. Oh, actually, I take that back. So the users like that you get back here, this is the data like structure and how the API expects it to come back, right? So you can copy that and paste that into your body here surrounded by parentheses. And then you can create your own user in this sense. So we have Galahad the Pure. The quest that he has is to seek the Holy Grail. And then his favorite color is blue, no yellow. And you can do that. And what will happen is if you get like a 201 response back, then that just says that that resource was created, that object that you sent was created, and it'll assign an ID to it, and then it'll give you back potentially what you entered. So a little caveat there too is that this is important to get that information back so that 1, you know what was saved, and then 2, let's say that on this endpoint you have, you know, Galahad's name here and his quest, but you don't have his horse's name entered yet, right? So you could imagine him applying to be a part of the round table in King Arthur's court. Man, I'm going super down this rabbit hole, but you can imagine him filling out a form application. It's like horse's name, you know, county of origin or something like that. And, you know, it's a multi-step form. You want to save all the information that's been entered. But if you don't send that along the next time you try to create or update a user, then maybe some of that information gets lost. So that's something to kind of keep in mind if you're working with APIs, that it's like some APIs will expect all the data to come back that you've already entered, and some will just save it, right? So it really depends. So it could be if you're using like a put request, that you're able to, just update things that way. So yeah, so I think that's probably good there. Does anybody have any questions kind of before I dive back in, or anything prescient?
Don't see any in the chat.
Perfect. Okay, feel free to, like I said, either interrupt or put it in the chat and keep it going. So basically, again, just kind of reiterating things. We use CRUD operations, so create, read, update, and delete. For APIs, we use them in web applications all the time and everything. So they're very common, right? If you think about WordPress 2, you're creating a post, you're updating a post, you're deleting a post, like all of those things that you can see and do in WordPress. That's part of the interface of WordPress, right? So before we actually had a REST API, that was part of like the actual WordPress API, like interface and all that kind of stuff. So again, if you want to, there's all of these links here. I put in some other stuff down here for like Laravel. If you're wanting to build APIs, Laravel also has a micro framework called Lumen, which is really easy to build APIs with. Loopback is a Node.js and TypeScript API building library, and Hasura is a GraphQL API library, or the API framework. So all three of these are like frameworks that you can use to build APIs with if you really want to get into it. So let's bring it back to WordPress. Why would you want to use WordPress as an API, right? WordPress is awesome when it comes to content management, right? That's what it does. That's its bread and butter. It is one of the fastest growing, even though it's so big, content management systems in the world, right? So it just does content management so well. Post pages, all that kind of stuff, right? Even custom post types. It is an okay all-in-one solution, but while it's great for content management, it might not be the best for WooCommerce or for e-commerce, right? It might not be the best for membership stuff. It might not be the best for forums and everything. If anybody's worked with like BBPress and BuddyPress and has a client that wants you to build Facebook for them, like that can get really bloated really fast. So maybe there are ways to combine WordPress's strengths with the strengths of other offerings to kind of create a best-in-class product for a client or a customer or whatever. As Becky talked about in her presentation, was that last month? Wow. That WordPress you can scale WordPress, you can make it secure, you can make it speedy and everything, but there is some stuff that you have to do with that, and there are some decisions that you have to make early on, like with hosting or the type of theme or plugins that you're choosing, and how much stuff you're going to kind of take from the ecosystem, or how much stuff you're going to custom build yourself to keep things very fast, right? So maybe you want to move away from the theme load or the plugin bloat or something like that, and just use WordPress kind of core offering of CMS, right? The nice thing about this, and that WordPress has an API now that's easier to use, is that you can pull from WordPress. And let's say you have a WordPress blog, but the company that you're working with also has a Shopify site, right? Well, Shopify also has an API. So maybe they've got some page content on there that's, legacy or something, but they don't want to move it for some reason. I don't know. But you can basically like start pulling from WordPress, pulling from Shopify. If you need to, you can pull from a bunch of other, places as well, right? And not just pulling content from Shopify, but you can also pull actual products and prices and all that stuff from Shopify as well. So kind of the end result of all this is that when using an API, and WordPress specifically as an API, you get to make it your own. And that's basically what WordPress is all about, right? Democratizing publishing, owning your content, owning the platform that you're building on, right? A lot of other offerings and stuff that we'll talk about here in a second, they are proprietary, or they're closed source, or they just, you work on their system, right? It's a managed offering and everything. But WordPress, for better and for worse, like you can manage yourself. You can host it wherever you want, almost. So you really get a chance to like if you're able to use an API and you need to do a lot of integrations and stuff, you can really make things your own with WordPress API, right? So talking about bringing your own whatever, right? But in this case, we're talking about bringing your own front ends, right? So what is all this like BYOFE? I can't remember how you pronounce it. BYOFE? BYOFE. Bring your own front end. So there, over the last couple of years, as especially like JavaScript frameworks have started to become popular, and other frameworks like Ghost or Craft CMS or all of these other frameworks are coming along, and they're offering APIs, and WordPress now too, that people are starting to want to decouple these things, right? And so we refer to that as headless, where you can take whether it's a WordPress backend or a data source in Ghost or now Netlify CMS or something like that, and you can put your content there or all your data there, and it'll spit out an API for you to use. So all of these endpoints like getting posts or getting pages or featured images and stuff like that, it'll spit all that stuff out for you, and you can use it. But again, kind of what I was saying is that some of these are going to be hosted and managed, maybe proprietary, and while there might be like a a free tier for an entry level, if you have a client that's larger or you need to pull in multiple people on your team, it's going to cost some money. And just having a headless CMS like this maybe would start at like $200 or $500 a month for the first like paid plan, right? So it could be quite a jump from nothing to something. But in that sense, maybe WordPress is a better option. You don't have to use the theme. You don't have to use the plugins, but you can. WordPress works by itself out of the box, right? But instead of moving to something like a sanity.io or a Contentful or something like that, where you have to learn the interface and learn how to build custom fields or custom types and stuff like that, you can still use WordPress and you're already used to it. You already know where everything is, and probably your clients are already used to it as well. It's a best-in-class CMS for a reason, right? So you can still use whatever you're used to. You probably don't need to migrate to another system, which is really nice because migrations can be rough. And then, WordPress has so much stuff built in and so much available to it. I'll demonstrate some of this, but we can easily create custom post types. We can easily use advanced custom fields to create custom fields and custom meta for posts and custom post types. Even Gutenberg now is gotten to a stable place where it's a great content creation tool, right? So there's also a lot of plugins that have adapted to an API system. Yoast is one, but like just WordPress in general, like page builders and Gutenberg, if they're building out pages and rendering those things as HTML, then you can use all of that stuff that you build in a page builder like Divi or Beaver Builder or something like that, and bring that into what you would build with an API. You can also develop custom REST API endpoints, which is very nice because like we saw earlier, if you're using a REST endpoint and you're like asking for a user or asking for a post, maybe you don't want all the information that comes along with that, and you just want to combine some stuff first, right? And I'll demonstrate this in a second, but if you ask for a particular post, it's not going to actually return the featured image information for it, because that would just be a lot of information to come back with the post. And so if you want to do that, you need to request the post first, and then request the featured image information that goes along with it. And that can get kind of tedious if you're trying to process like 100 posts at a time or something like that. So the other thing that leads into, like I was saying before, is GraphQL, and WP GraphQL is a plugin that is a GraphQL plugin for WordPress that has just hit version 1.0. So it's stable and things. So I've got to go back and change some things that I've been working on with it. But it's really exciting because it just makes getting data from WordPress even easier, right? So what, I guess too, like, are there any questions on any of this stuff? I'm trying to set the stage so that what I'm about to demonstrate seems to make more sense and stuff like that. So, but does anybody have any questions so far? Just looking to see if I can
we do have
box.
One question, what are some of the best ways to handle updating clients with dynamic data, such as new posts or new users added to WordPress?
Through like an API system?
Yeah, Tom, I don't know if you want to pop
Yeah,
on.
Tom, feel free.
Hey there.
Yep.
Yeah, I was thinking about using, like, if WordPress is the back end of an app, right? I was just thinking of it in like an app context, or in like a static site context where you're getting some statically rendered assets at the time you build your front end, but then there's always like dynamic stuff, right? You've added a new
Right.
post or a new user to the system. What's sort of like the best, what's sort of some of your thoughts on how to get that dynamic data efficiently?
Yeah, that's a great question. Especially with like what you're talking about, like static sites with like something that's pre-rendered, right? That's kind of like what you're asking about, like a Gatsby or something like that.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. So I have some thoughts on this, and I have never really had a chance to sit down and like build this out, but you could see, let's say you're the New York Times, right? Wow, that's a lot of content, and you probably have comments on your posts or your articles and stuff like that. You have special content, like so many considerations. But let's just say, like, you know, you've got news articles that are going out every minute, basically, and then you also have, I don't know, millions of articles in your archive catalog. I would, for something like that, I would start looking at how, like, basically dividing up archives into like real time and real time stuff. So you have real time and you have archives, and basically what you could do is pre-render those archives, right? And kind of like have an incremental build for those. And then I would figure out a way probably to partition them into like kind of subgroups of, I don't know, years or months and years and stuff like that. So that those stay like pre-rendered and you're not always building the whole catalog all the time, but you're just rendering updates as they come in, right? So that's the first thing. The second thing is that I would have probably, if this was WordPress, is that I would have like any articles that are new within, let's say 24 to 48 hours, just as an example. Those aren't being pre-rendered, those are being built on the fly, right? So instead of having your whole entire catalog being built on the fly, you're limiting it to the last 24 to 48 hours. And that's just rendering, that's just the read part, right? So comments and stuff like that. So you could, if it is real-time rendering, you're probably going to have more active comments on those because they're newer, right? So you're going to want to keep updating those comments. That allows you, if you're real-time rendering kind of the more recent stuff and you have other things that are pre-built, it allows you to basically have two different kinds of comments as well. One is that you can have a comment submitted to a form that's like a live form that will render right away, or if there needs to be moderation, I don't know. There's a lot of, I guess, you know, considerations there. But then if you have something that you're trying to comment on that's in like the archive, let's say, then that is a different form, and that goes to, because it's static, right? There's no database that you're hitting. Then that goes to like, let's just say like a Lambda function or a Netlify function if you're using Netlify, where basically you can submit the contents of that form or contact form, right? Or maybe it's or comment form or contact form. And then those go into kind of a holding tank. And when you spin your site back up, or at least it's decoupled, those comments or those contact forms will come into your site and you can moderate them. And then on the next build, they're available, right? So you might have, again, like I said, like basically dividing things into two, like more real time and more archive content, and treat those things kind of differently. But yeah, and I don't know like how that is for architecture. I don't work at a news organization, but that would just be like my speculation on how to do that. And that's definitely not something that would be done in a week, right? It's going to take a long time to architect and figure out and have run smoothly. But I think it'd be something that would be very interesting to experiment with. So I don't know. I hope that kind of answers your question as far as like how that could be dealt with. So maybe I went off on a crazy tangent.
Nope. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, cool. So we can look now that we kind of have like context or whatever at building our own, bringing your own. So it's a BYOFE, right? But we can do this in WordPress, and normally I would say, like, you don't want to use plugins and stuff. Just do this in the code. But the plugins that we have available to us in the ecosystem are really super helpful for this, and they kind of mimic the what you would get on like a Sanity or a Contentful, right? So we have custom post type UI, and that just allows you to quickly create a custom post type. We also have advanced custom fields. There's a free version of that. The pro version is awesome, and honestly, it's so cheap, like for how often you'd probably use it on projects and stuff. But the free version of it is going to get us what we need to do in this little demo. You can also make custom endpoints fairly easily. And if you've been around WordPress and you've used some of the internal functions, the internal APIs of WordPress, like get post permalink or get post thumbnail or something like that, you can start seeing very quickly how you would be able to send back custom information based on an API endpoint. Also, like I was saying, WP GraphQL is very stable now, and they also have a plugin extension for custom post type UI. So I'm just going to demo all that stuff now. Basically, what I'm going to demo doing is building a book application or a books API. And we're going to look at just adding like a title, like kind of content, which would be like your review of it, the rating that you gave it, and the featured image. So like the book cover or something like that. And then we'll set that up in an API on WordPress, and we'll create a custom API as well. And then I'll just kind of quickly, I have it built out already, but show you how you could build out fairly quickly a reader for it in like React using Create React App. You could take those components too that you built in Create React App and move them over to something like Gatsby or NextJS as well, depending on if you wanted to do more dynamic or more static stuff, right? But you'd be able to use these components in multiple places. So that's kind of those are kind of the building blocks that I'm wanting to walk through. If you want to try this on your own, you can. I'm using local by Flywheel for, I think, this part. Actually, I think I think I have this stuff already ready to go on a Stratic site, which is kind of another consideration. But yeah, basically, we're just going to walk through all that. If you want to go further with this, you could do things. If you did want to have like your own catalog of books that you wanted publicly available or just for you, you could add in genres. You could have an authored list. You could add in other custom lists and stuff like my books to read, my favorite books of all time, or whatever kind of thing. You could do this with movies. You could do this with beers or wines or whatever, right? Like the possibilities are endless. But yeah, basically, like all we're going to do here is just do Create React App. And if you want, you can check out the code and everything for it at the end here. And yeah, so I'll get going. So the first thing to do here, get this guy out of the way. So if you go to Stratic.com, you can create like kind of a trial site and stuff. So I've got mine here, just WP Books. I've gone ahead and preloaded the plugins here, advanced custom fields, custom post types UI. I imported just a bunch of like post content here, which is all the theme unit content from WordPress. It's just like a bunch of demo content so that we could look at that if we wanted to. But yeah, and then WP GraphQL and WP GraphQL custom post type UI. So we want to build a books API. The first thing that we do here, and can everybody see this screen? Okay, cool. I probably should ask that about 2.5 minutes ago. First thing that we'll do is like come over here and we want to add post types, right? You can see that you can add taxonomies and everything else. But yeah, so basically want to do the post type slug as book, right? And the plural label, that's just like remembering everything that I've done. Okay, so Yeah, so we got the plural label and the singular label, right? So if you look up here at posts, this is basically what we're doing is we're creating another post type, right? So you can see all posts with an S, add new, and then it also has categories and tags, which we're not really going to touch right now. And then auto-populate labels, just fine with that. I think that we'll just leave it as that. So I'll add post type. So now just with like 3 pieces of information, we have a books post type and it's ready to go, right? So that's really nice. There's also a code on the WordPress codex that you can kind of copy paste. I say copy paste all the time, but copy paste and put that into like a functions PHP file or like a plugin or something like that. Maybe an MU plugin so that nobody can ever deactivate it. Stuff like that. So really quickly, like we've got that and it's ready to go. It uses the new Gutenberg editor, I believe here. So yeah, so we got that. We can add a title like, WP Madison. Oh, let's say, I don't know, haunted WP Madison. I don't know. Just get some good old lorem ipsum there. Great. Okay, so we've got our first book post here. I'm just going to publish this for now and we can come back to it. I don't know about y'all. I'm getting used to this new Gutenberg editor here. So, but if click on the view post, right, we can see, great, we've got our haunted WP Madison and we got our content here. So you can imagine this obviously being the title of the book and this being like our thoughts on the book, like it was super spooky, whatever. That kind of stuff. So we want to be able to add in a rating for this and the featured image. So this already has the featured image available to it because it is a post type. So we can click on set featured image. And I think I have some here. WP as an API, book covers, excellent. I got some good fake O'Reilly book covers here. So changing all the stuff. Yeah, great. Okay, so let's just do that. Changing stuff. And then probably because of mania, I'm just going to change this to changing stuff. All right, so update. And come back over here. Got book, changing stuff. And now we've got our featured image in there. Okay, great. I'm just going to, before I add some more books, go back and we want to add a rating for it, right? So you can think of like a star rating or like a number rating, right? And yeah, so what you do here with custom fields, this is going to add basically, go back to this changing stuff book on the sidebar. Like I basically want to add a little section here that says like rating, right? So advanced custom fields allows us to do that really easily. So just click on add new and we'll call it book fields and add a field that's called rating. And if you like tab down or click out of this, it automatically fills that in for you, which is very nice. And then we want a scale. That's what it's called. No. What is it called? Radio button.
Is it in the, is this the free one?
This is the free version, yeah. Date, time picker, color picker. Hold on. Oh, maybe it's just the number. Huh. I'm totally not like skipping over it, right? There's nothing in here that says scale. Okay, I think, oh, okay, here we go. Yeah, I think it is number what I want. So I want the minimum value to be 1 and the max value to be 5, right? So I want to show it in the post type as that post type is equal to book and have it just be a standard meta box, position on the side. Okay, this looks good. I think this is good. So publish that and save it. That over here. And got, should pop up over here on the side. Cool, book fields, rating, 5. So, man, I'll have to go back and check on that. I feel like I was using the free version, and I'm just going to triple check here just to make sure. Range, that's what it is, not scale. Okay, so step size 1, min value, max value 5. There we go. Okay. All right, so refresh this. Oh yeah, got a nice little slider there. Okay, I'm gonna give that a 4 because it took a little bit for me. Okay, so update it and view book. Whoops. If you missed that ever and you need the permalink, you can just click on the permalink there. It'll get you back to books changing stuff. All right, so we don't have the rating here, and you know, like maybe we're at the point now. This is the whole purpose of the API, right? Is that, well, we don't really want to build on the WordPress theme. We want to build our own thing, right? We want to be able to integrate this with, I don't know, a company website. Like everybody has their own WordPress book review thing, and we want to have a massive conglomerate reader that pulls in a whole bunch of different, you know, book APIs and stuff like that. So what can we start doing here? Let me make sure that I've got everything that we need on the custom post type UI. If you ever need to edit anything, you can come in and click on the edit post types and make sure your book is selected or whatever you're working with, and just scroll down. So I think what I want to make sure that we have here is show in REST API, because we want to make sure we can call it, and then want to make sure that we could do the base slug to use there, but I think it probably is books. Maybe we want to do that. Not going to worry about adding controller class. We could turn on has archive if we want, and then save post type again. Another thing, if you are doing custom post type work and you're not seeing the things that you expect, you can come over to settings and hit permalinks and just make sure that you're on the right like post name setting, or that you let's see here. This also like flushes everything out that if you've made some updates and stuff like that. So now that we've got our books and everything set up, I'm just going to add a couple more books so we can have more than one book. So what is my next featured image here? We've got bloated JavaScript frameworks. Fantastic. JavaScript. Excellent. Throw in some more there and come back to document. Just close this stuff up. Rate this as a 5 and publish it, and do one more. Googling for regex. It's right by my desk all the time. So got regex. Same thing. Okay. Ooh, cool. All right. So we got that. Got our featured image. Publish. Great. So now if we go to the front end of the site, see a bunch of random post stuff because we do, but I think if we can go to books or just book, great. We can see regex, JavaScript, and all that. But again, you know, we want to build our own thing. So that's exactly what we're going to do. So the first step that I'm usually doing here is to check on the API itself, right? So what I'm wanting to do here, and let's just make sure. Yeah, okay, great. So what I'm doing here is the the website that this is on is wpbooks.site.static.io. Great. I also have basic auth here because we have like an HTTP pop-up that comes up. So if you have to deal with that, you can do basic auth and stuff with that. And I'll just show you what I'm talking about here. So we have the basic auth credentials, WP Books, and the password right there. So great. So what I'm able to do here just by hitting the posts endpoint is get back a list of all the posts, right, that are available. So you can see that there's, this one, the title is right here. So block buttons or block image and all that. Hello world. Great. Excellent. So because this is a custom post type, what I can do is, and I specified that I wanted the endpoint to be books, I believe, right? Great. So I can hit that, and just like the original example with the request recres.in, now I can hit books and with a GET request and get all of the books back, right? So I have the regex book here, the JavaScript book here, and the changing stuff book here, right? And so it's just sending me 3 because there's just 3 books. Great, that looks awesome. So one of the things that you'll notice here is that I don't want any of this date information or the GUID, the GUID, whatever you want to call it, when it was modified. I don't want all that information, but I get all that back in a REST API because that's how it's built, right? I have all this other information too about like links and self, and this is entirely too much information, right? So one of the things that you can do is create a custom REST endpoint. And I probably should open this up earlier, but this will be fairly straightforward. Just get some quick SFTP action here. All right. Okay, so come over here to themes, and we're just going to put it in the functions.php folder, or the not folder, file, functions.php file here. So this is the 2020 functions.php file. And I'm just going to dump it all the way at the end. This is where I do another copy pasta really quick to get all the code that I want. Okay, so what is all of this doing here? There's 2 different functions that we're creating here. The first, and this is all in the WordPress codex, and I have a link for this in the slides that you can just go to and just see kind of how I modified this. But basically what we're doing is we just want to grab the latest books. So I want to get all of my books. I'm setting an array here, the empty array, and just using get post really quick to get all the book post types, book post types, something like that. If it's empty, just return null. And then for each of these posts, right, that I'm getting back, what I want to do is I want to basically filter out all the information I don't need, right? So what I want, I will just preserve the ID for fun, but the title I want the post content for like my review or something like that. I want the post thumbnail, and I just want the medium size. I don't need the other sizes, and getting the rating, right? So the post meta here. And then let's see here. I'll probably also just copy that. Let's get the permalink for good measure here, because this is not going to be like a statically generated site, but it is going to be like it would be available as well. So you can do get post permalink and just want the post. I think that should be good. Great. Okay, so we got the post permalink here, and then it's going to return that array. So again, basically what we're doing is we're calling all the books post type. We're gathering those up and saying, I just want the ID, the title, the content, the the image, the rating, and the permalink. And that's it, because otherwise I'm going to get all that information back, but I don't want it. So Then what we do is we have that function and we want to register an API. So again, this is from the codex. You can obviously write this as a full-on function and everything, but you're registering a REST route, and you create a namespace here. So I'm just calling it my books version 1. That way you can namespace, you can preserve these if you need to. And if you ever need to create a new API endpoint or a different version of your API endpoint, you can version it with like version 2 or whatever. And then I want it to be all books and say, get all my books, right? So just make sure that that is uploading. And instead of, get back to Insomnia, instead of hitting this here, let's see here, we're going to do my books v1 and then all books. Let's see if we get anything back. Awesome. Okay, so now you can see like only 26 lines of JSON are coming back instead of, I don't know, 200 or something. And I'm just getting back the ID, the title, the content, featured image, the rating, and the permalink, right? That's all the information I want back. The nice thing about this too is that because you're not getting back extraneous information that you don't need, you're also avoiding things like, if I would, again, just was to query this, right? Like, you get the ID of the post here, but you could also see, I think, the author. Let's see here. Yeah, you just get a lot of extraneous stuff back. I want to say like that used to be that you would also get the author and like ID and like maybe username pack, which is crazy to think about, but hopefully maybe that's been changed. So great, this is exactly what we want. The other thing that I would say too is this is normally where I'd be like, how many of y'all have done theme development? And you could raise your hands and stuff like that. And I can see a few people and everything. But basically, like you might also say like, cool, great. I don't want any of this to be, because this is ugly, right? You know, nothing knocking the 2020 theme or whatever, but you know, this is not what I want it to look like. And so you could come in and actually on the theme, you could actually remove everything except for the style.css and take all the styles out. And on the index page here, you could basically just do like a return. And then you could also pull a WordPress and something like, you know, silence is golden or whatever. So you could just do a return if you were deleting, this is on the index, right? So if you were deleting everything else, this would come back as that. So folks wouldn't be able to access the front end of the site. But even though that's there, the API itself is still accessible, right? So you could have just basically a single or two file theme, right? Plus your functions.php if you're doing it this way. And basically cut out all front end access to your site. Now, we're not going to do that because the Create React app demo does use the permalink to direct back to the site and everything. So before I move on to the Create React app, are there any questions, or is any of this not clear or anything like that?
This is awesome. And I told Luke that I'm actually understanding this. So good work.
Right on. Cool. I'm glad to hear that, Becky. Thank you. Cool. So just go back here to the keynote and just make sure that we got this all figured out right. So yeah, I think we're good here, ready to move on to Create React app. So what I'm going to do is source. Okay. Oh, I know what that is. All right. So I'm not going to go through a crazy Create React app tutorial or anything. But basically what you can do is Create React app will give you a very simple starting point for creating a React app. Let me show you what it looks like here. because I'm sure I'll want to edit it. Okay, so the structure, it usually doesn't come, I added a few things here, but it usually doesn't come with the assets or components folder here. You just get kind of an app.js file, which is the main application. You get an index.js file, which is basically setting up the app itself. And I think that's basically it. So, and then it pulls in all of the stuff that you need. So it's just, like I said, a really quick and easy way to get started with React. So what I'm going to do here is just kind of talk to you about this kind of setup a little bit, and then tell you where everything is and how this is kind of structured. So the app you can think of as like the main container, right, that you're working in. And I am not an amazing React developer. All this React stuff I've picked up from just working on Gatsby sites and React and working with Gutenberg stuff. Like I've, I think I took Wes Boss's intro to React like when it first came out and got halfway through it, and I was like, this is so complicated. But the more you play with it and the more you just try to build stuff and everything, the more it's going to seem familiar and make sense. So what we're doing here is we're using hooks versus a class-based component. So setting up basically a URL, which I should change here to be this URL. Caveat here too, or just like a little something to note, is that if you use something like Insomnia or Postman to kind of test the APIs and stuff like that, then you already have what like your calls that you need and everything. And so you can just kind of copy and paste these in here, right? So we got that. And then we're basically setting up an initial books array. This is all JavaScript now. And then setting up state. I'm going to breeze through this because I don't want to get in the weeds of hooks and stuff like that and everything. But basically, like how this is structured and how I want it to work is that we have the WP reader. This loads up as an application. And then when I click this button, I want it to fetch, right? So we can fetch as much as we want, but it's not going to get anything, right? So, and that's because I think I need to put in some auth stuff here for working on the site. Before I do that though, you don't have to. You could use fetch, or you could use good old XHR requests that are all native to JavaScript and everything. Or yeah, I'm using Axios because I was using it in another project, and so my mind was already there. But basically, we're saying like get sending out a GET request, right? So just reading. We're not trying to create anything or whatever. Sending out a GET request to this URL. And then with those responses, I want to save those all as the books, and I want to set fetching to false. So if you notice here, I've got this little fetching spinner with a dog and a bone. I could slow down the network, and that would probably help me be more clever, I suppose. But oh, now it's too slow. Okay, well, I'll have to make this work better on 3G. So this is going against the REST API endpoint that we just created, the custom REST API endpoint. This is an Axios request just demonstrating the GraphQL endpoint. And yeah, so then it'll respond and everything like that. Then we return basically the rendering of the app. So this might look very familiar as far as like HTML goes. This is JSX, and it's just like a mishmash of HTML and JavaScript. So building out our header, adding in the fetching component. So if it's fetching, then show that. And if it's not fetching, don't show it. And then if we get back any books, so if the books.length, just saying like the books array has something in it besides 0, currently it's a 0. But if that's the case, then show the book list and then pass it all the books. And then so for the book list is a really easy component here. And this is React, and a lot of JavaScript frameworks will componentize like your web page layouts and stuff. And WordPress does this too with like get template parts and stuff like that. So and partials, right? So have kind of those same concepts here. So basically just saying like, like we want to show and it's Reddit list because I was building a Reddit app with this before. So want to show the Reddit list here and, sorry, this is the book list component. It just has a class name of Reddit. There we go. And then we're going to iterate over them. So for each book that is in the array, we're going to create a book item here and show basically the URL if it exists, or sorry, the image URL if it exists, show the image, do the title, my favorite React function, dangerously set inner HTML. So we will dangerously set the inner HTML. And this basically is dangerous because it doesn't escape the HTML. So if you do have like malicious content or something like that coming back, it could be open to cross-site scripting attacks and stuff like that. So that's why it's dangerously set, but I'm not too worried about it right now. And then also like a link back. So this is why we added the permalink and everything. And you can see like I actually don't have the rating in here, but we can add that really easily, right? So I think I need to Axios. Actually, I think I just looked this up. Axios auth, basic auth. There we go. So add in the auth here. Let's do that and come back over here. So back in my fetch request, get the URL. Great. Okay. Let's get that and need to get the username again really quick. Okay, so let's see if this allows me to fetch it right now. If not, I've got a local version here. So, all right, fetch it, go and fetch, no results. Okay, no worries. We're just gonna switch it over to my backup plan and I'll debug that one later. So WP bookish. Local. Great. Okay. Awesome. So what we see here is that like we can what I did was I reset this to like my local here because I know it works. And what it's doing is, like I said, going out and using Axios to get the books from that URL endpoint. And this is the custom stuff that, this is the custom URL that we built out, right? So these little console logs here have, the information coming back that we asked for from that URL, from that custom endpoint, I mean. So we have the content, the featured image URL, the ID, which we're not using, the rating, which we should use. And then, yeah, and I think I actually have this trimming on the book. Yeah, so if it's over 500, just trim it and add, dots after it and stuff. So you can see like all of these have dots, and then you can go to read more and it's going to go to the full book review article or something like that, right? On the actual WP Books local. So that's how that works. And then, like I said, we should probably add in the rating and everything. So we'll just do rating, super easy, like. So what I'm doing is adding in basically HTML here, and then if you open parentheses with JSX, you add in JavaScript. So at this point, it is going to look like, put it before the title, which might be good. But yeah, there we go. So got a JavaScript and our regex, and now we've got ratings in there and stuff like that. So you could see like, does anybody remember the CSS Garden website? I think it's probably still up. CSS Garden.
Yeah. It was
yeah,
so long ago.
Yeah, Zen CSS Zen Garden. There we go. Yeah, so like you could do basically this website is all the same HTML markup, I believe, and then you can click on different images or different links here, and all that is changing is the CSS, right? So you can get a bunch of different looks and feels and stuff just by altering the CSS. This was back, I think, when CSS3 first came out, to kind of demonstrate the changes that you can make to the same HTML markup, right? So you could, I would say, like, you could imagine a project for you, especially if you wanted to learn React and everything, would be to create like a WP Reader garden. If you have a single, book endpoint, right? This is just how I've styled it. I'm super not a designer and everything. So you could have like a bunch of different options to load up different CSS or different React JSX layouts and stuff like that, and fetch the same books all coming from the same API, and lay it out however you like in like a Pinterest type grid or like a slider or something like that, right? So, but the point with the API is that if you have your own API, you're creating your own data, and you can give it back to a React or a Vue or a Svelte or a 11D front end and all that kind of stuff, however you want, right? You just need the data at that point. So that's where this relates to the bringing your own front end and kind of building your own WordPress API. So I was gonna set up a Gatsby demo as well, but ran out of time, and this is probably too long already. So before I just kind of close this out, any questions at all? Anybody? Feel free to just jump in.
None in the chat.
Cool. So yeah, again, just kind of picking up from here again. This one was just create React app. I think all you need to do is install Node.js, which you can install on all operating systems, all major operating systems, I should say. If you want to see the code, it is at my GitHub on WP Reader. Again, there's going to be some Reddit references in there because I put this together pretty quickly based on another project. But you could, like I say here, like you could take, because Gatsby also uses React, you could take those components and just move them over into a Gatsby site. And if you have your WP GraphQL queries all set up, you can query with the Gatsby GraphQL layer and pre-render and pre-build that site out as well, using the same components, right? So yeah, obviously this isn't all, it's not all butterflies and unicorns and rainbows and everything. There are some caveats and things that you probably want to be thinking about if instead of just like jumping into like the headless or the bring your own front end things, right? Like these examples are read only. Tom, you were asking earlier about like the dynamic versus the static and stuff like that. Depending on what you're doing, or if you have like e-commerce and stuff, you might not want to be doing a full-blown like headless decoupled WordPress, especially if you're using WooCommerce, because that can get super tricky. But like I was saying before, if you want to have all of your products and stuff on a Shopify and all of your content on a WordPress, and you want to create kind of a unified mesh of those two things, you can really easily use something like Gatsby or NextJS or Gridsome or 11D or any of these, right? Or build it out in vanilla JavaScript or something else. You could even use Laravel, right? Like any full stack framework too, because all of those frameworks also have API interfaces and API methods that you can use to make those requests and stuff. So yeah, same thing too, if you're wanting to build out like a front end for WordPress that basically replaces WordPress, you might need to work with auth and figure auth out. You might need to be figuring out like how to do comments and stuff, especially if you're working in a static environment, right? How do you post comments to a database, or how do you post a contact form to a database? And the company I worked at previously, we built out a headless WordPress implementation on Gatsby, and the way that we were able to, we used actually Gravity forms to build and manage the form on the front end. So you render the form out, and we deployed the Gatsby side of things with Netlify. Netlify has Netlify functions, which act as kind of ad hoc functions for your app. And so somebody could fill out the contact form. And because the WordPress site was still available, but not really referenceable, you basically fill out the contact form, you send the information to the Lambda function, which captures the information on the contact form and sends it back to the WordPress site Gravity Form API endpoint to capture that data and save it in like a totally separate place. So the nice thing about that is that, you know, they have a front end that doesn't relate at all to WordPress. And that makes that front end very secure because there's no database to hack and all this other stuff, right? And they wouldn't be able to trace where that function call is going because it's looping through like a netlify function, which is what you would do normally anyway with WordPress or some other server-based API call to loop, you know, those API requests through a server so that that traffic and that information wouldn't be found. So anyway, keep going on this. The main thing that's awesome about WordPress is that there's so much that it offers. We can just plug and play. And this is another example of that, right? Like you can just do this really quick. We built out the API in literally like 5 minutes, right? With just custom post type UI and custom fields. Actually didn't even touch on the GraphQL part of things, but that's also very easy to use. So yeah, you don't have to use React or Gatsby. You can use Vanilla.js or really whatever you want. So, but I would reach for this this kind of solution if speed, security, and scalability were a requirement, and they didn't want to pay for like really big hosting plans and stuff, or get onto like a Pagely or a massive Pantheon plan or something like that. I would look at a decoupled solution because you can hide your WordPress site away on a $5 to $10 a month DigitalOcean droplet or a Cloudways instance and stuff like that. And when you're not using it, you can shut it down, right? You can spin down that droplet or whatever, and all you're doing is spinning it up when you need to build out your site, right? So yeah, I would also look at doing this if, like I was saying, if there's like we want to use WordPress for the blog and we want to use Shopify for our e-commerce store, and we want to have people fill out a contact form, but we want that to go to Airtable so that we can, you know, easily manage all the contacts and stuff like that. If there's like all that kind of stuff going together, if you don't feel like you know WordPress very well, but you do know like the front end ecosystem, for example, then, you know, this might be a really good solution for that. We've also in the past had clients say, I don't want to use WordPress. And so then it's like, well, cool. Like we could still use WordPress for, you know, content management, but maybe we want to use a different, you know, use a different front end and stuff. So it's not seeming like it's WordPress, and hide WordPress away. So, but yeah, basically if you don't need the WordPress instance. So actually this, you know, New York Times example of like some dynamic content and some archive content, that would be a really interesting use case. So yeah, does anybody have any questions?
Mitch wanted to take a look at the CSS that you used in the demo.
Yeah, sure.
The 3 book cards, I think.
Yeah. So I stole a lot of that from Bootstrap, actually. And it is fairly straightforward, just less than 300 lines of CSS. I'm sure some of this is actually bloated because CSS is not something. I usually also say I would be a professional student if I could, and if I never had to write another line of CSS, I'd be a happy guy. So I love using frameworks like Bootstrap. I just didn't want to load in Bootstrap at this point. So, but it ended up, yeah, doing everything. So I think the CSS is probably pretty typical, especially at the top here. You're just setting a bunch of defaults. Card body here. This is card body. A lot of these classes are just taken straight out of Bootstrap. So it's basically going to the Git Bootstrap documentation and stealing all the CSS from the elements themselves, yeah. Right?
No need to rewrite it.
Exactly. So just trying to think if I did anything else here. Form control. This form control class is literally Bootstrap. Yeah. Prepend, this is all from leftover from the Reddit thing. So this prepend stuff isn't actually being used. Yeah, so there's actually probably even less stuff. If you've used Bootstrap before, these BTN and BTN primary and BTN primary hover, those are all probably pretty familiar to you. So card body, that's all Bootstrap stuff. Keyframes, yeah, that was the bone fetch. So yeah, that's this is probably the only custom CSS that I wrote.
Is that so?
Um,
This, sorry, I'm gonna jump on this. It's there's a comment in there that tells you what the last edit was. Is that this
oh, yeah.
this
Oh,
ID
this,
set?
yeah, this is
That's cool.
GitLens. So yeah, this is a Visual Studio Code, and so that GitLens is like if you're on the root of the Git repository,
Mhm.
Git repo that you have locally, you can see like who create. So this is all me. So, but if you're working on a collaborative project or whatever, and you're like, well, who did this? Instead of going through like git blame on your terminal or something like
Right.
that, you can
That's
just
cool.
see like, oh, it was Becky.
Yep.
Becky.
Of course it was. Nice.
So if it's CSS mishap, it was probably Nate. So that guy.
Uh-oh.
Just gonna go on
Is there
mute
an
really
issue?
quick.
Okay. Well, does anyone else have any questions? That was a lot and it was great. And I think it's expanded my mind as far as what's possible. Even though, you know, most of the frameworks have gone over my head in the last years. I think I was just waiting for everyone else to figure it out and make it easier for, you know, me to jump in. So.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of room to establish kind of like not best practices, but like recommended, like almost like recommended setups and stuff like that. I think there's a lot of room for that yet, depending on like what framework or ecosystem you're kind of working with and all that, or just how to even start thinking about all this stuff. So yeah, like I said, I've been thinking about this for at least 6 months, if not a couple of years, like just how this stuff can all fit together. So, because it's a lot of fun. I love working with APIs. So yeah.
Well, thank you, Nate.
Great. Thanks, Nate. That was great.
Yeah.
Thanks,
So,
y'all.
if you missed the beginning, I just mentioned that we'll probably skip December since it's so close to the holidays, unless I have a volunteer up to a week beforehand like Nate did. Thank you, Nate. Otherwise, we'll see you all in the new year. Oh, Mitch, you're muted, but you're talking.
Yeah, I just said thanks. This is really great.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got it.
And it's good to see new heads and old heads. So thank you all for coming. And again, on the madisonwp.com, there's a link to join our Slack. So you can, if you miss any of us greatly in the next 2 months, you can at least chat. So.
Right on.
Okay.
Y'all,
Thanks,
if y'all
Bill.
have any questions too, like feel free to ping me as well. So happy to answer any questions.
All right. I got to go pick up my turkey now. So I'm going to see you all later.
Thanks,
Happy
Nate.
Thanksgiving.
Thanks again.
You got it. Good to see y'all.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.